Today I am joined by Karina Gould, who is running for the Liberal leadership. How's it going?
Good, great.
Would
Thanks
you
for
like to
having
give
me.
people just a brief rundown of who you are and a little bit about your background so that people can become more acquainted with you? Acquainted with you?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Karina Gould. I'm the Member of Parliament for Burlington in Ontario, and I'm running to be the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. I was elected in 2015, and I've held four different cabinet portfolios. So I was the Minister of Democratic Institutions, of International Development, Families, Children, and Social Development, and most recently the Government House Leader. I'm a mom of two. My son is turning 7 on Saturday, and my daughter just turned 1. And I grew up a middle class kid in Burlington, and it's been amazing to represent this community. And I'm really excited about this Liberal leadership race and looking forward to the results on
And
Sunday.
so you mentioned you're a mom and you have two young kids. You were first elected in your early 30s, correct? Late
Early,
20s,
late
yeah.
20s. Yeah, I think I was 28 when I was first
And you had a
elected.
couple
Yeah.
other firsts, including I think were you one of the first, if not the first, member of parliament to um,
What was it the first? So I am the youngest female
okay,
cabinet minister in Canadian history. And I am the first federal cabinet minister to have a baby while
gotcha. There
being
we go.
cabinet minister. And I also hold the distinction for being the second cabinet minister in Canadian history for having a baby. I thought maybe there might be another colleague in between my first and second. I gave them 6 years, but it turns out I'm first
Well,
and
because
second.
it's interesting. There's not a lot of young people who get into politics and are able to climb the ranks that quickly. So I think that's a testament to um, both your qualifications. Like, I mean, you're quite the educated one, aren't you? You have. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your degree now. I did my research, but
Yeah, so I have a degree from McGill in political science and Latin American studies, and then I have a master's in international relations from the University of
that's the
Oxford.
one I was thinking of. I was like, I'm pretty sure she went overseas, and I'm pretty sure she did something pretty impressive, but I cannot put my finger on it. No, that's awesome. I mean, I think that it's very easy for when we look at politicians to either assume that they only have a baseline education or assume that they are that their education doesn't matter because it's outside of the realm of what's important for politics. But you seem to have a blend of different degrees and experiences that show that you're both like an average Canadian, right? Like growing up middle class, and you're a young mom and now with two kids, and young by like modern standards, right? Like I mean, I'm a young dad too, and
Yeah, yeah, like I'm not young, but I'm like young for a
yeah, yeah.
politician. Yeah.
But that I think that makes it interesting because you're not inherently following the trajectory that I think most people lay out, and I think that that's a breath of fresh air in
Mhm.
politics. But at the same time, you're a lifelong liberal, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I joined the party when I was
Does
14.
that, do you think that as much as your down to earth experiences and being a more average kind of Canadian might be a blessing, do you think that you being so in the weeds in the party for so long is a detriment at all, or no?
No, I think on the contrary, it's really important. I mean, to have been a member of the party that you are seeking to lead, I think matters a lot. And it also means that I really understand and appreciate what it means to be a grassroots party member and a grassroots liberal. And one of the first policies that I put out was about renewing and rejuvenating the Liberal Party of Canada. Like we are only as strong as our party membership is. And, one of the things that got me involved when I was 14 as a kind of geeky kid who was interested in politics was the fact that it was a way for me to contribute to the future of my country and to putting my ideas forward. And one of the things that I've been kind of disheartened by over the past couple of years is seeing how we've gotten a bit of what we call an Ottawa governmentitis, and disconnected from the grassroots of our party. And so my campaign, has been just as much about becoming the prime minister, but also becoming the leader of the Liberal Party, and really making sure that we have space for grassroots voices in our party.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that focus on the grassroots movement idea, and the farther that parties get away from those members, it seems like they kind of misstep a bit, they lose their way. Um, and
Completely.
we've seen it in the Conservatives, we've seen it in the NDP, we've seen it historically in the Liberals. It
Mhm.
happens both provincially and federally. Um, But just kind of going back a second, you said you grew up in Burlington. And Burlington, when you were a child, it's not the Burlington that we see today simply because the city exploded. Like I grew up in Vaughan, and my mom grew up in Woodbridge as well. So the Woodbridge that my mother grew up in was very Anglo-Saxon, not very Catholic, and not a lot of Italians. There was more Jewish people than Italians. And then I grew up in Woodbridge in an era where there were only Italians. And now that I'm gone, Woodbridge is a completely different city than it was even when I grew up. So over the course of the 30 some odd years that you've been in Burlington, what's been the biggest change that you've seen, and what do you think this city needs to be doing in the future to continue to be competitive on the Canadian stage?
Well, look, Burlington is a great community, and it has certainly grown a lot. Although, I mean, it's grown more up than like sideways, if we're
Well,
talking
the
about it
borders
that
only go
way.
so
Uh,
far versus we go pretty far
yeah,
north.
yeah, and but that is very
Yeah.
rural, right? In kind of the north part of Burlington. It's definitely become a lot more diverse than when I was growing up, which I think is a great thing. I grew up as like one of three kids in my high school who had Jewish backgrounds. So it's definitely changed more now in Burlington. But it's always been a really good community. And even though, we are considered to be in the GTHA, it has its own distinct identity, and its own really distinct community. And that's something that I've always really enjoyed. And certainly like growing up in Burlington, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I do now as an adult with kids living in Burlington, and just how wonderful a community it really
So one of
is.
the things that I was kind of hoping to kind of lean into there a bit is uh, when we look at Canada, and not to compare us to the States, but one of the things that I think that the States has that Canada would benefit from is they have a lot of these small towns that are strong and resilient with their own industries, and that allows for people to really move around from state to state, and it gives the ability for people to really kind of migrate around the country. Whereas, especially if you're in Ontario, there's really one of two things you can do as a city. You can be part of Toronto, right? The GTA is really just an amalgamation of Toronto and where it reaches out to, or you can kind of strike it out on your own. And I think one of the only really successful examples of that is the KW area with a very high AI and tech startup base. What do you think that the Liberal Party, and if you were to become the Prime Minister, what do you think that you could do for these medium-sized cities like Burlington to allow them to become more robust so that people feel as though they aren't trapped in the Toronto bubble and they can move out to different parts of not just Ontario, but the rest of Canada?
Well, one thing I would say about Burlington is our economy is actually quite diverse. In Burlington, we have a really wide range of manufacturing, but we also have tech companies. We also have professional services. We also have academia. I mean, we have the McMaster DeGroote School in Burlington. So we are quite a diverse economy for the size of the city that we are. But I think that part of it is ensuring that we are, investing in Canadian companies, and we are investing in Canadian technology, and we are creating an environment where Canadian companies cannot just get started here, but that they can grow and that they can stay. One of the big challenges that we have, particularly for startups in Canada, is we don't necessarily have the capital that keeps them here. And so oftentimes, instead of Canadian entrepreneurs want to stay in Canada, but they're being pulled to the US because that's where the capital is. And so I put forward a pretty ambitious plan a couple weeks ago when I was in Edmonton about, having an ambitious objective of creating 1 million new Canadian entrepreneurs, with, basically creating an environment that will say, hey, we need folks who are going to start businesses here, grow businesses here, and keep businesses here. But also, we're at a very interesting point where a lot of our entrepreneurs, or business owners in Canada are kind of on the verge of retirement. And so we also need to have some transition plans for those businesses, in order for us to keep those jobs here. And this is even more important in light of the tariffs that have been imposed from the United States, so that we keep those really good companies here in Canada and those jobs here in
So
Canada.
you actually touched on something that's really interesting, and I think that you can uniquely speak to it when it comes to this leadership race. And even in politics in general. It sucks for me to say this because it's only a technicality, but Pierre Poilievre is the first, as far as I'm aware, because I think Jagmeet Singh is a little older than him. I think Pierre Poilievre is the first millennial party leader in Canada. He is by
I'm not
I
sure
think by
he's
1 year.
millennial.
I was looking at his age. I think by
By
1 year,
one
which is
year?
why I was saying I
Okay.
don't like to say it. Um, but he's got that boomer energy. You know what I mean? But I think that yeah, right.
I
It's
do.
it's just the
Yeah. But
resistance to
like,
change.
yeah, there's lots of really
No, no,
cool
there
boomers.
are.
He's
It's
he's
that
just
it's
not.
more so in terms of the
Yeah.
stereotyping, the resistance to change and views on that. But as somebody who is a millennial, we don't. We are the largest cohort now in terms of voters. We are the largest cohort in terms of
Yeah.
workers. We are the one of the smallest cohorts in terms of ownership. Even though we are contributing one
Mm,
of the largest amounts to our economy, we are not seeing our fair shake, especially those of us who weren't able to buy prior to the pandemic. That was the last opportunity for many young people, even people I know who are
yeah.
engineers, lawyers, struggling now to enter the housing market, struggling now to make ends meet. So, from that perspective, as a millennial yourself, as somebody who um, has seen what has changed, especially in a city like Burlington, going from houses being
Yeah.
$100,000 to well over $1 million in your lifetime. What can we do about generational fairness in Canada to actually ensure that the millennial generation isn't only getting ahead when our parents pass on wealth to us? Like outside of anybody who can inherit generational wealth, and that might not occur for many people for another 20 to 30 years, like
Mhm.
how are the millennial generation supposed to survive, because that's right now where the conservatives are still beating the liberals in the polls. It is in the millennial age category, which is not something that typically you would see in the conservatives. So what can we do to win back millennials?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, one of the reasons why the conservatives are ahead is because they've captured that frustration and that anger. And they're not actually putting forward solutions. They're just like holding up a mirror to it and like, yeah, I hear you, things suck and everything sucks. And I'm going to, agree with you that it sucks. But they're not actually putting forward solutions that are going to change that. So I put forward a really ambitious housing strategy a few weeks ago that has three pillars, and it looks to tackle the housing crisis kind of in a complete way. So the first one is on ending homelessness in Canada and really, doing this in a meaningful way where it's not just about getting people housed, but about providing wraparound supports so that they can become stable and then if they're able to actually participate in the workforce. The second piece, which is kind of going in this vein, is about having an industrial housing strategy. We as a government made some significant investments in housing, but it's been 30 years since the federal government, really was involved in housing in a big way. And Canada has fallen far behind our peer countries when it comes to non-market housing as well. And that creates an imbalance in terms of housing affordability and affordable access to affordability in our country. So what I'm talking about when it comes to an industrial housing strategy is, let's look at housing along the continuum of affordability. Let's use some of the incredible expertise that we have in this country when it comes to modular housing. And that's not just single family homes, but that's actually multi unit buildings that can be produced in a quick and efficient and affordable manner. It could be tiny homes. It could be co-op housing. Here in Burlington and across the country, there used to be really significant investments from the federal government in co-ops. And this is a great way to get people into ownership, but also to do it along the continuum of affordability. So I want to make big investments in co-op housing and then also to expand not-for-profit housing as well. So let's make sure that we are tackling access to housing along the continuum, and then continuing to invest in programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund that work with municipalities to, get rid of red tape so that we can actually build more houses that are needed in our communities, but doing so in a responsible way. And then the third pillar, and this probably speaks a lot to millennials or Gen Z, but first time homebuyers. So we created a program called the First Time Homebuyers Incentive, which would allow an individual to share their down payment with the federal government. But it was only about 5 to 10% that the federal government would take on. That's really not enough to enable a young person, someone who's starting off in their career, to choose to enroll in that program and take advantage of it. In the UK, they have a similar program, but it's up to 50% that's shared with the
For
national
first time
government.
homebuyers
And
specifically,
what that
correct?
means Yeah, for first-time home buyers specifically. And so what that means is that it enables first-time home buyers to get into the market, to share that equity with the government, to buy it back over time. And, at some point they might take on full ownership of the house, or what they would do is at point of sale return the part from the government back to the government. So it gets people into the market. And then the idea is over time, as you progress in your career, as your income increases, you can buy back more of the equity for your house, and you are become a homeowner. And so it's thinking creatively, looking and seeing what other countries are doing and what works, and applying that here in Canada. So I feel very strongly that we can tackle the housing crisis, that we can actually, make the housing market fairer for everyone and get people into the housing market. But we have to be really committed to doing it. And the difference with what I'm proposing versus what Pierre Polyev is proposing is that mine will actually build homes, and it will actually build communities, and it will actually get people into the market.
So, when I hear those answers, I kind of hear a range of things, and I'm not trying to ask you to put a label on anything in particular, but I would assume that there are some people out there who think the government owning part of my home, oh, that sounds like socialism. That sounds like something that's a little scary. While at the same time, it's still a free market solution, and I think that there are some progressives out there who might be concerned that it's not far enough. And that's one thing that I have seen about when you get into like the nitty gritty of like the nerds online, like the people who follow me and will watch a video like this. What they're gonna be boiling down to when they think about the liberal leadership candidates are, who is the progressive candidate, and are there even any progressives in the Liberal Party? Because many people don't consider liberals to even be in the center; they consider the Liberals to be a right wing party, depending on where your personal Overton window falls. So I understand that not everybody wants to label themselves, but where do you see yourself along that political spectrum?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm probably slightly left of center, but I'm not an ideologue. So I'm somebody who takes good ideas from, could be the left, could be the right, could be smack dab in the center, but I probably fall slightly left of center. But what I would say is, like, if you were to look at my housing policy, you could be like, okay, she wants to eliminate homelessness and provide wraparound supports. That is such a left wing idea, but here's an actual free market solution when it comes to getting buyers, first time buyers into the market. That sounds more right wing. But the whole idea is, let's take good ideas to solve the problems that we have, and not really worry about where they fall on the spectrum, so long as they're going to solve the issue and do it in a way that works for people.
Speaking about policies that work for people and things that, once again, part of working for people is being palatable. Um, I believe all four candidates have spoken to pausing the consumer side of the carbon tax. Is that correct?
Well, the three others, I believe, have said they're going to get rid of it, and I have
To
said that
pause
I'm
it.
going to
Okay.
pause it. So I'm definitely an outlier within
And
this
so,
race.
do you see, because the carbon tax has been effectively demonized by bad faith political actors, are there any other carbon based initiatives that you think might be a good solution to follow, or do you think that it's more so about increasing the levy on the corporations to ensure that they are creating more business minded solutions to the problem we're facing?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I think that when Canadians are upset about the carbon tax, it's not that they don't want to fight climate change, and it's not that they don't want to protect the environment. They're saying the cost of living is out of control and I need help making ends meet. And so, from my perspective, just because Pierre Polyev is lying to Canadians and telling them that it's the price on pollution, when in fact it was inflation and other things happening around the world, like the war in Ukraine, doesn't mean that we should, completely reorient our climate plan because of that. But my commitment is to canceling the planned increase for April 1st, because I hear Canadians when they're saying now is not the time to increase it. But from my perspective, I do think we need to increase the price on big polluters, on industrial polluters, but we're not going to be able to make up the difference between the consumer price and the industrial price. The math just doesn't add up. And if we were to do it at the same degree, it would place a pretty significant burden on our industries. So I think we just have to have an honest conversation with Canadians about what this looks like and what it means and what our plans are. Because one of the things that we know, and it's a fact, and in many ways, the consumer price on pollution is a very conservative idea. It's a free market solution to this issue, and it's one that conservatives have run on
In the
many
past. Yeah,
times.
Harper was the first
Uh,
one to run on a carbon
in the
tax. Is that
past.
correct?
Yeah, yeah, and Aaron O'Toole most recently in 2021, but it was a really weird one because it was like kind of big brothery. It was like you can like you'll get this, but we'll put
Oh
it in a
yeah, there was
green bank
the
account that you
account
can
for it,
spend
and
on.
then yeah.
Yeah, but you can only spend it on green things. Like it was really bizarre
Yeah.
actually.
It
And
was there was a little bit too much overreach for a conservative candidate. I appreciated in retrospect that he was trying, but maybe not trying in the
yeah.
right way.
Yeah, but anyways, it was like really like government in your bank
Yeah.
account kind of thing. So and deciding what you can use your money for. But where was I going with that? I think we have to be honest with Canadians about what this looks like and what it means. And I do think there are other things that we should be doing though. Like, we had a relatively moderate rebate when it came to electric vehicles and electric hybrid vehicles. I would say let's increase that and let's include gas hybrids as well, because that for a lot of people might be the first step
I had
towards
to
an
buy a
electric
hybrid because there's
vehicle.
no
Because
electric minivans. So I wanted to buy electric. My only choice was a hybrid
yeah,
minivan. That's it.
yeah, and I drive a hybrid Honda CR-V, and I'm really happy with it. I
Oh yeah.
save a ton of money on gas, and it's really effective. And so, for a lot of people, that's a great first step. So let's encourage people to make greener choices that will also save them money at the end of the month. And I'm also proposing to bring back the home energy retrofit program, and to do it in a bigger way as well. Because again, like if you are insulating your home or you're transitioning to a heat pump or you're getting off of diesel or home heating oil, those are things that are going to reduce your emissions, but they're also going to save you money at the end of the day. So I think what we should be doing is recognizing that Canadians want to make these choices. We can help them make those choices, and then they can both save money and help
Yeah,
the
I mean, the more
environment.
people learn about heat pumps, like the more, like, I mean, I can only hope that we get to a future where most homes are built with heat pumps in mind in the future, especially ones in the southern part of the country. But some of the things that it keeps boiling back to for me, and I bring this up because you are younger in terms of the liberal leadership. Um, a lot of these sound like big projects: fighting climate change, solving housing, dealing with the debt, dealing with the economic crisis that we're facing. Many people who are in Gen X and the Boomer generation, they had problems that they had to face, but we are now reckoning with a lot of the solutions to those problems. Is it fair that the Gen Z and millennial workers are now we're going to be having to bear the brunt of a lot of these solutions, or uh, essentially what I'm kind of getting down to is, do we have to buckle in for hard times, or is there a way that we can be rosy about this? Like I'm just trying to be a realist, right? Like do we have to really just kind of come to terms with what Canada's facing and buckle in?
Yeah, I think we have like I mean, I'm not really in a place where I'm like, oh, let's just like let the planet burn, like don't worry about it, or like no, people shouldn't have access to affordable housing. Like no, these are big things that we have to tackle, and you should and we should elect governments that want to tackle these issues because it's about improving people's lives. Like the whole reason why I'm in politics is to try and solve some of these major challenges and issues to make people's lives better, and that's to me what it's all about, and the whole reason for doing it, it's about people, it's about Canada, it's about Canadians. And is it fair? Maybe not. Life is not very fair generally, but in fairness, some of the generations above us, like they were worried about nuclear war. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that. But it's different. like I don't think any generation has, gotten off easy or scot-free. They've had different opportunities or things that have been easier, but they've also had things that have been, harder that we hopefully don't have to deal with. All that being said is, governments have to do big things and they have to do big things for their people. And what you hope is that they're doing them in a way that is going to make people's lives better, and easier and more effective. And that's, what
I
I'm all
think when
about.
you talk about government doing big things, I think that for a lot of people, ambition it really is something that they look for. So I can only hope that regardless of whether or not you are successful in this upcoming leadership race, that you continue to strive for big things. And I think that that's something that people would really like to look forward to. One last question, kind of before we get close to wrapping up here. I know that other people have asked this of you before, but I ask this of all political people who come on to my podcast. Where do you stand on electoral reform? I believe in the past, I think you talked about a citizens' assembly, or is that correct?
Yeah. So look, I was part of a government and the Minister of Democratic Institutions when we walked away from electoral reform. But we did so because honestly, we were quite naive when we were first elected in 2015, thinking that if we struck a parliamentary committee, that parliamentarians would put partisanship aside and come together for the good of the country. And I've been in politics for 10 years now, and as much as I still want to believe that, I've been around too many times to see how this story ends. And the committee, the only two things that they agreed on was that we should not have mandatory voting and we should not have electronic voting. So I hear people when they say that they're still interested in this and this is something that they care about. And so I think the way to approach it is to have a citizens assembly, and for whatever the outcome of that is to go to a referendum. I also learned very quickly when I was in Parliament that first year that, particularly for the Conservatives, they just won't accept a change in the system if it's not brought to a referendum. And you cannot change how we govern ourselves and how we choose our elected leaders without the buy-in of Canadians. And so, for me, if that's what people want, I don't have anything against a citizens' assembly and putting it to a referendum.
Awesome. Last thing, just one last question before we finish up here. Um, there's been a lot of negativity going around in politics recently. Especially you see Pierre doing the whole Canada's broken thing, and now he's doing a pivot. No, Canada first, Canada always, whatever, however he says that. And
Yeah.
then
It's like whiplash, right?
yeah,
Like you're just
it's
like,
a
dude,
bit
what do you
much.
mean?
And then we're
Like,
dealing with Mr. Trump down south, and Trudeau's sunny ways seem to be coming to an end. But is there something that you see on the horizon for Canada that puts a smile on your face and gives you a sense of hope and optimism for our future?
oh my goodness. I mean, the way that Canadians are responding right now to these ridiculous tariffs from the United States gives me so much pride in this country and in our citizens, and in our future, because it just shows how strong and resilient and smart, and committed to our country Canadians are. And Donald Trump has managed to do something incredible. He's united Canadians. With the exception of even Pierre Poilievre is like a fan of Canada all of a sudden. So like he's managed to unite us and really focus the mind on what's important for us as a country. And I think that gives me so much hope and so much pride in who we are as Canadians. And it's, people in every community across this country, of every age, of every demographic, who, when I meet them and talk to them, they tell me when I go to the grocery store, I'm looking at the products and I'm deciding what's Canadian, and that's what I'm buying. I had this great call with this like elderly couple in Quebec last night who said to me, like, you know what you need to do when you become prime minister? You need to create a common logo that clearly illustrates that it's made in Canada, so that when I go to the grocery store, I don't have to be looking for where this product is from. I'll just see the maple leaf and know that like I should be buying this product. And so I have tremendous hope. I also like when I speak with younger Canadians, and I mean, you're a teacher, so I hope that you feel this way as well. But when I speak with younger Canadians, I'm like, we're on track. Like the kids are okay. And they've got, they've got good values, they've got good ideas about the future. They are compassionate, they're generous, and that just, completely gives me hope for this
It's awesome.
country.
I appreciate it very much, and I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. Have a good one, and good
Oh,
luck,
thanks for
and
having me.
I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the leadership race.
Thanks, me too.